Well, there you go.
There you go.
Welcome. Will the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission for Monday, that's new for us, September 20th, 21, please come to order. This evening's meeting will be virtual planning and zoning meeting hosted by Zoom. Seated this evening are the following members. Jamie Stein.
Hello.
Richard Wallace.
Good evening.
Scott Edmond.
Hello.
Sean Cosgrove.
Hello.
And I am Phil Johnson. Staff present are George Kroll, our town planner, and interim, is it interim zoning enforcement officer?
Acting.
Sorry. We'll get to the definition of that. Lisa Piombino, planning and zoning administrative assistant. This meeting will be recorded via the Zoom platform and made available on the town website. The secretary will now read the legal notice.
I don't think there is one.
There's no legal notice?
This is not a public hearing.
Consider it read.
It's just a meeting. So for the sake of protocol, would someone like to make a motion to open the meeting? Anyone?
So moved.
I'll take
That's
Jamie and
Tyler's
then
second.
Richard. I'll do a roll call vote. Jamie Stein,
Yes.
Richard Wallace,
Yes.
Scott Edmond,
Yes.
Sean Cosgrove,
Yes.
and I will also vote to open the meeting. Glenn, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. Tonight, we're picking up on our review and discussion of the zoning regulations and how come it's not, hang on a second here. Okay, there you go. You got it on your screen, the regs?
Yes, I
Yep.
do.
Perfect,
got
okay. Um,
Special districts.
Yep, so tonight we're starting in section 5, which is special districts. These are districts which don't fall under the general category, for example, of a residential district or a business district. So these are some of the special districts in town. And then if there's any questions or comments, if we go through, please speak up. The first district here is the RS1. This is essentially the shoreline area. And it is a little bit different than the other residential districts because of the seasonal use limitation in the regulation of conversion from seasonal to year round. And so as a result, it didn't get grouped in with the other zones. It got placed in its own separate category. I think we added some provisions related to accessory uses and structures. And I think that's it. Any questions on the RS1?
Why do we have a seasonal restriction zone?
This is a historical anomaly. We've had this special district, which is the, Leeds Island Leet property where they own the land and individuals own the cottages. They're historically summer only. They're very limited. And we've had this special regulation for that area since when I came to work here 35 years ago. And we really haven't changed it much. We talked in staff with Glenn a little bit about, maybe you're just doing away with this or revamping it totally, but then that would involve a lot of sort of politic with the people down there. They have this whole special community. And so we decided to just put that on the back burner. So we pretty much left things the way they are.
Hey,
So-
George, I got a question. I know how it was with summer cottages and all dotting covering the shoreline. How many of these particularly seasonal cottages are left in town?
Well, in this district, at least by zoning law, they're all seasonal. There are a few exceptions that got converted to year-round use. There's also kind of a question about, especially in some of these very simple cottages. I mean, what does that actually mean? They'd be fairly easy to heat them if you wanted to live there in the winter. There's been no attempt to enforce the seasonality provision except through the ownership mechanism, no attempt through zoning to enforce it. And there hasn't been a lot of pressure to convert. There've been a few cases here and there where there's pressure to convert. It does require the approval of the owners of the land, the Leet family or the association or whoever they are. to make that happen. And so it's very difficult in this particular area to convert to year-round use, as opposed to the other neighborhoods that don't have this zoning restriction, that are still shoreline and that are still summer colonies. The cottages have gradually over the years been converted to the point where I would say almost all of them now are full-time use.
So I have two questions, one for Glenn and one for George. Glenn, have you encountered this before? And I'll move to George. George, is the LEAT land considered entirely agricultural? Is that what has given them this kind of free reign over this large piece of property?
I'll let Glenn answer the first part of the question.
I can't say off the top of my head that I can think of any other provisions exactly like this, but I think there must be other examples along the shoreline. Some of the beach associations that even have their own zoning authority under provisions of state law, et cetera. So it's not a great answer to your question, but that's all I have.
I don't know the answer to your question about what if this land was agricultural before these cottages were all built. I think they are mostly built probably in the after World War II, maybe. Whether it was agricultural before then or not, I don't really know.
How about currently?
I don't think there's any agriculture down there. I mean, there may be some, some mowing of salt hay or some, something
Not in
like
a long
that.
time. That culvert collapsed a while ago.
Yeah, it's I'm not aware of any agriculture there.
Other than maybe the cattle, but
Yeah, there's
So I'm just, what I'm driving at is whether, I would love to know whether other towns have dealt with this, and whether there is kind of a special dispensation being given to the Leet family based on historical facts, and whether we're going to run into problems down the road. I just want to be sure that we're
similar along that same vein. I was thinking, we've greatly increased our desire to have, accessory dwelling units. And could you apply to have an accessory dwelling in this area?
No, I don't think you can do that in this zone. By zoning, I think the zoning accessory apartment provision or regulation prohibits them in this zone, if I recall correctly.
So there is the new public act, which is related to these issues. And this might be a reason why the town would want to opt out or exclude the RS1 zone. I think the addition of another dwelling unit, I'm not quite sure what provisions exist down there in terms of other deed limitations or anything else. I think my sense overall is that this is an issue the commission wants to tackle. Probably, maybe it's appropriate to deal with it at some point in the future.
Right.
But it's part of
A
this
separate
update.
project.
Yeah.
Right.
And I
definitely.
agree.
does the RS1 zone apply only to the Leet's family land?
No, there are a few other lots within the district that are owned independently. But the vast majority of them are owned by the Leet family, my understanding.
But as I understand it, all of the non-subject, the ones that are not subject to the seasonal provision are owned by the Leets.
It could be. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, maybe it's something we can explore as a
It's a separate,
committee.
I think it's, the point is, it's really a separate project in terms of zoning, as far as I'm concerned, because there are some unique individuals and property owners and features and history here.
In other words, it's the third rail,
Yeah, and one of them.
one of them.
However, is this going to turn into non-conformance when?
No, because the zoning regulation is specific to this district.
So if we just said, well, we're gonna let the state regulations be enacted, there's gonna be some questions that go on down there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
Right.
they're extremely limited by sewage disposal capacity also, which would not be waived.
Yeah.
Seems we had a special permit or something for something down in that general area not that long ago.
Nap,
Right.
leak, what was that?
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
Nap.
Do from time to time.
You gotta bring in Harkins a bunch of times finally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
What I'm, kind of driving at is, no harm, no foul. If there's nothing that we have to deal with or can anticipate to be a problem for the town, based on these regulations in RS1.
Yeah. I think that's the case. Another
Yeah.
figure of speech might be, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, so
But I mean, also there's no, like that section 5.1.c seasonal use limitation, there's no enforcement of that. Nobody's actually checking that nobody's staying there for more than 14 days.
No, that's right. It's neighborhood enforced.
So as I understand it, the land is all owned by the Leets and the occupants basically have a handshake agreement.
yeah, that's the thing that just, this is just hearsay, but the Leafs have had a very sweetheart deal on this whole thing for a very, very long time. And I have nothing against the Leafs. I'm just saying that they're unique in Guilford. That's
Yeah.
Well, again,
just so we're all aware. That's all. I'm
yeah,
saying.
no, I mean, I think for the 165 acres on the water, it's assessed at, a little over $1 million, which is a bargain.
That doesn't sound high enough, but that's all right.
We'll revisit this at another time in order to value Glenn's input in time.
I think the general premise here, I think there were a couple places where George and Aaron and I did wade into regulations and make changes. This was not one of them. I think later on we'll have a conversation about signage, and I think that's another one that is probably something the commission's going to want to have to wade into at some time in the future. The next zoning special district here is the Church Street Overlay District. This is configured as a village district under Connecticut state law. Village district gives the commission the ability to get into aesthetic issues in terms of the appearance of improvements and renovations visible from a public roadway. And so this regulation is set up to designate it as a village district and carry that forward.
Do we have a map of is this the downtown district?
No, this is the Church Street between I-95 and Route 1.
So the Adams School area and a couple of doctor's
Yeah,
offices and then some residences. And
Got
the
it.
entrance to West River Village.
Right, that's it.
Thank you. Very good, Richard.
And sorry, just one question. So is it the design review committee that sort of
Yes,
oversees the aesthetics? Okay.
right.
And this probably falls within the historic district too.
No, it's outside the historic district.
It is.
Yes,
Yeah, that
It's,
starts at Route 1 to the green and down.
correct.
All right.
Now, my thoughts on this, Glenn, is this gives more like an opening or instead of in transformation from residential to like professional services, medical and things like that.
Right, that's correct. That's why this is the underlying zone here is residential.
Correct.
But this allows some more liberal use of those properties for offices and for, I think we said three dwelling units.
How many are allowed now?
Pardon me?
How many dwelling units are allowed now?
Two.
So why are we jacking it to 3?
Well, the idea was that when this was created, there was a lot of pressure, if you will, to convert the existing houses along that stretch to offices or personal service uses. And if we wanted to allow that, we thought that the village district might be a way of allowing some of that to happen, but still retain the quasi-residential character of it through this design review process. That's what this was designed to do, and it's kind of worked fairly well. I mean, a number of the properties have been converted to office use.
Yeah, but also are there many two dwelling unit?
There are some twos would be allowed by right in the R1 zone. And so this allows a little bit more density. I can't think of too many cases where that's actually happened over the years.
So
I think most of the conversion has been to office.
So can I play devil's advocate? If there hasn't been a lot of pressure to go to 2, why are we increasing it by 50% to go to 3?
Well, we're not increasing it. That's what it's on. That's what's in the books now.
3 is in the books now?
This regulation is in the zoning code now, correct?
Okay.
Yeah, we haven't really changed any of the content or any of the substance of this.
Why does it say?
And that kind of goes to the whole issue of density and parking. And so if 3 is allowed and parking is adequate, I'm fine with that. Because I think we all want, a reasonable density in that area.
Glenn's note there suggests that maybe I'm not correct, Phil. I don't remember, Glenn. Did we increase this from to 3?
I don't remember that we did, George. I don't
sorry.
know if we added in no more than, just to clarify, so.
If we could just flag that, just to get some
I'd have to-
clarification.
Yeah, I would like to, yeah, right. I would like to do that.
Yeah, we'll check that.
Got it.
I don't
Thank-
think we did that. I don't think we increased it, but I can't remember, and I don't have I could dig out the old zoning, the current zoning here. I'll look it up and see what I can find out.
Yeah,
well,
Thank you. Thank you.
I just want to go back on what Sean talked about. The more we have these personal services, we're going to have room for parking,
Yeah,
converting residential units to office space and
mhm.
service parking.
Well, each conversion or change does have to be vetted by the commission as part of this process, including design review. And if we don't find that there's adequate parking, then we wouldn't approve it. Or if they
Correct.
wanted to put the parking in front or in some other way that was at a negative impact, we could deny it or cause modifications in the plan.
Right.
And again, this has been on the books for a while, and I don't think we haven't really had any problems with it.
Okay.
I'm just, George, I appreciate that we haven't had any problems. I just think that if we're going through this process with Glenn, I just think that we should be anticipatory as far as,
Sure.
possible future problems. And
Yep, I agree.
that's all I'm saying. I don't,
Of course.
I don't want to anticipate. I don't want to anticipate problems that are not going to be there. I just want to be aware of,
Right.
the future. That's all.
I want to be aware of the future too. I don't know if I can do
Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
that.
Excuse me just a
If you
minute. I
did,
have
you
to
play
go
the
to
lottery.
the water cooler here for a minute and get myself some water. Hang on. So excuse me for a minute. Go ahead, Glenn.
I'm gonna switch pages here, if it's all right, the commission.
Sure.
The next zoning district is the Gateway Overlay District. This permits additional uses. Trying to think where this allows by special permit in buildings or accessory buildings which existed as of March 2016. So 2-family offices, preservation of at least 1 dwelling unit, personal service establishments, retail stores selling antiques, etc.
Sorry, Glenn, can you define the Gateway Overlay District, or is there a?
Yep, bear with me just for
Oh,
a second.
that's the west end of Route 1, is that correct?
Gateway overlay.
Yes,
Hang on a sec, I gotta find the legend
Oh, that's
first.
like a TS, isn't it?
it's just past the TS.
Gateway overlay is this green hash here.
George will need it.
We didn't go with you, Glenn. We didn't switch pages. You have to
Are you
unshare.
set as, Glenn, are you set as a co-host? Do you know?
I am, yeah, no, I thought, okay, so hang on a second there. You're right,
You
I
have to
got
share the
confused.
program.
Thank you, Jamie.
Happens
all
to me all the
excited.
time, Glenn. It's
All
okay.
excited moving around. So I apologize to everybody. So I have the zoning map up
Okay.
here on my screen. The gateway overlay is this green hatch.
Uh-huh.
And as we go to the west side of town,
Got
what
it.
we see here is the green hatch on Route 1.
Right. This district was created a few years ago when we did this little planning study, which I think we call the Route 1 West Planning Study. And it resulted in some commercial rezonings. And one of the things that we did was, that was create this gateway overlay, which is sort of similar to the Church Street Village District, although it's not technically a village district under Connecticut law. But it allows for property in residential zones that front on Route 1 to be developed more intensively and perhaps more economically, reflecting the fact that use of some of the Route 1 houses, the houses that front on Route 1 were suffering market value because of their proximity to the street. And there was a motivation on the part of some people, perhaps, to convert those properties to some other more remunerative use, more intense use. So we created this overlay district. And if I'm not mistaken,
And how long ago was that, George?
I would say it's about 6 or 8 years ago.
Yeah, I was
I
on the
remember
commission when
exactly,
we did
but
it.
nothing has happened. None of the properties have been.
And give me the map, or give me, is it from Flag Marsh, or is it?
It's
Not-
like, you know where
not
the,
that
Tanner
far west.
Marsh, Tanner Swamp.
You putting the map up again, Glenn?
I am getting there, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Or further from Flag Marsh?
Further.
Yeah, it's quite a bit further west than that.
Okay, all right.
It's very limited. It's all residential. There is a business, there's a farm business use in there, which is one of those larger.
Oh, yeah,
parcels.
that is Olympic Farm?
Olympia Farm, right?
Olympia, right.
Yeah, that's part of this district. There was some interest in converting some of the single family residences to one of these uses allowed, like a business, professional office, or multifamily use under the limits of this regulation. But I can't remember any examples where it actually happened.
so it's interesting because the majority of the Olympia Farm property is not in the district.
No, okay,
I mean, if you look at the one big parcel that's kind of in the middle,
yeah.
that's, I believe that's the farm, but they have a kind of a driveway portal. So their
I thought it was
driveways in.
I thought it was the larger piece to the east of that, but no.
You're the pro, I'm the Joe.
I
I'm
don't
not
have
sure.
the GIS up in
It's a
front of
little
me
to the
here.
west of the Maritime Grill.
Yeah, the Maritime Grill is the furthest west is as part of what's labeled there, the TS3 district.
Yeah, I'm just really struck by the fact that you've got these small parcels, TS3, CD, TS, then TS3 again, and then, you know, it just looks.
Well, and the funny part to me is like the way we've split zoned them from the standpoint that, like, at least look at all the parcels that go down Bruce Lane where you've got half the property in one zone and half in
Yeah.
the,
Right.
Yeah,
that's odd to me. I mean, it's a certain number of feet back, but and maybe they tried to protect abutting neighbors from commercial activity. I say they, I sat on the commission then, so I
You.
should have
Yeah,
I should have a better recollection of this, but
yeah.
Mine is just as fuzzy as yours, Phil, because we've been around almost the same amount of time. But I can remember a number of applicants coming to us to change to TS3.
And I remember saying no to a couple of them, saying, look, you have a, your only connection to Route 1 is this tiny spit of land. But,
Yeah.
it is what it is.
And then there was,
What I'll just say, and I'll stop talking, is that we should make a pact that we should not create any more districts. We should try to do something to reduce them. This is just.
Well, and it seems that when we create these, they are done with the best of intentions, but to have so many districts in such a small area with such different restrictions, it creates confusion. And I think our goal really should be to try and reduce that to the extent that we can.
We did try to do that in this context, but the other thing is that this was not a proposal that just came out of thin air or came out of one or two persons thought process. This was part of a package of proposals that was made pursuant to a careful planning process that involved property owners and business owners and Economic Development Commission.
Post Road West Committee or something?
Yeah, something like that. It was a deliberate process that went on for a while. There was a lot of public participation in it. So it wasn't an ad hoc proposal, which doesn't mean that it's necessarily good or bad, but it came about, through a deliberative planning process.
Yeah.
George, we're not questioning that, but I'll put Glenn on the spot. There must be a way. And what we talked about at the very beginning of this was to help the public understand the planning and zoning code, to enable them to look at it and figure out what they could do on their own property. So have you worked with other towns where they have tried to, look at these different zones and, if at all possible, meld them and simplify the code so that there's not this incredibly complex process to go through to figure out what you can build, what you can't, what you have to get a permit for?
I think as part of this process here, in my work with George and Aaron, we recognized that we had a plethora of business zones, and the pattern was even sort of more hopscotch than you're going to see when we're done. I want to remind you that this is the current zoning map, because when I was originally brought this map up onto the screen, we were talking about the RS1 district, and I didn't have it on any of the three map set, but we have looked at combining some of these districts. I don't know, George, do you think we've cut the number of districts in half approximately?
Yeah, I think we've done a nice job of doing that. I mean, I appreciate at first glance, it looks a little bit hodgepodge, but it's not really when you look at it on the ground, at least as far as I'm concerned. If you're a property owner, you live in one of these districts, the people living in the Gateway Overlay District, for example, and the owners of the property there were very much in favor of this idea. So to them, it's not something that's a mystery. Maybe to the outside observer, it's a little bit harder to grasp, but the people with the most interest or most at stake, I think, at least at the time it was created, felt that it was a very important thing to do.
I think I have a couple things on this. It's, for one, I'm usually all for efficiency, but would you say, George, that by having multiple specific small areas like this, it makes it a little bit more flexible, in that you can,
Sure,
if a certain area just needs a certain different different regulation than another, it kind of increases the flexibility. And then as far as like confusion, I think that's the whole point of why we brought on Glenn, was to clean up the regulations so that it's easy, that if you see that you're in a certain zone, then you go check that zone's regulations, and it should
Right.
be a lot more clear.
yeah, here's the proposed pattern. It looks a little
Right,
clean.
Definitely more clean.
Yeah,
I
Right.
think, like I said, I think I'm typically, in life, way more in favor of efficiency, but I feel like, there's some flexibility to be said for having these various
Yeah, I
Different
think so
zones.
too.
Yeah.
That's true.
I mean, I would agree with that, but at the same time, I feel like a lot of the discussion that we're having is along Route 1. And I just wonder, that's where like a lot of these smaller districts are concentrated. And I just wonder, it seems like there's been a lot of portions of Route 1 have been planned for, but was there ever like a comprehensive Route 1 plan? Because in my opinion, a
No.
gateway overlay district should be at both gateways of the town, right? Like, why is there just one on the west side? So I'm just wondering if in the history of the town, if we've looked comprehensively at all of
Oh,
Guilford's Route 1 stretch.
It's kind of the plan of conservation and development, right, George?
Yeah, the answer, I mean, it's specifically focused on Route 1, the answer is no. We've focused on Route 1 East, which is the concentration of highway commercial uses. That led to the creation of new zoning. It led to the creation of the Design Review Committee. We focused on the, Route 1 West on two different occasions. Once we looked at the area in its entirety from exit 57 all the way west. And then another time we looked at it in a little bit more detail in the area that we're now calling the Gateway area. So the answer is no, we've never really looked at it quite that comprehensively. We do have a process underway now under the auspices of the Safe Streets Committee, which is looking at transportation issues much more comprehensively than we ever have before.
Yeah.
Not so much in the interest of commercial development, but more in the interest of transportation and promoting alternative transportation modes. But that's quite comprehensive. But we've never really done what you suggest, Jamie.
Hey, George, doesn't this kind of bring back Weedos?
Yeah, Weedos was like the first kind of comprehensive Route 1 West study. West
Sorry,
Side Economic
West
Development
Ag
Opportunity Zones
over-
or something like that.
Overlay
Oh.
development.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, can I just throw back that map for 1 sec?
Sure.
The pink area where we just approved the drive-through in the middle, right, where a little there,
Yes.
is the triangle north of that now being included with it in the next zone?
I'm sorry,
So
included
the
in what?
triangle north of 95 across the street from the rock pile, or is that a different color? I just don't
That's a
have the
different
same.
color.
Okay, sorry. Just
It
checking.
doesn't look like a different color, but it's a
No, it
different zone.
I just wanna make
Yeah.
sure, we got our magentas and our fuchsias and,
I think it's a different zone.
I-
Well,
I
I
would-
don't think so.
I
no,
think we ought to, George, let's make a
Yeah, we
note
gotta.
to check this.
No, it's intended to be part of this same zone. You're right. So
It is.
under this proposal, you could have drive-through in that area. Yes.
So it is a different zone. It was,
It's a different zone now,
Previously-
but it's proposed to be in the same zone. Yes.
which now allows drive-through restaurants.
Yeah, a good catch, Glenn. I mean,
Well-
Phil.
So it's now, it was a C4W.
Yeah,
Sorry,
that was
I don't know
eliminated.
that. I'm looking at it. It's like, no, this is not a Rain Man thing. Don't worry about it.
Well, in the interest, I mean, you've said you wanted to simplify this and combine.
Yeah,
zones,
well,
so there
we
did-
also
we did.
agreed from the start that there weren't going to be like profound changes just going through that,
Yeah.
we wanted to.
Well, now, hold on a second. Last time we discussed, all of Route 1 East was going to be, we were going to open it back up to drive-throughs again. So
Right,
let's- let's
that.
remember our
I
steps.
think we agreed that that was a profound change.
Yes, thank you.
There you go. There's
Mark
the
that with a
existing
big
zoning.
PF.
That's the existing.
Phil,
No, this is-
are
Alright, so
you
let-
raising the question of whether, Route 1 West is going to be a series of drive-throughs through?
No, I'm just raising the question that triangle across the street from the rock pile is being slid into, or proposed to be slid into the zone where we just allowed drive-throughs. thereby
Yes.
expanding the capacity for drive.
I,
Now, we,
Yeah.
and just to be clear on this, we made that proposed change in, as reflected in the map you saw previously, before you amended the zoning regulations to allow drive-through in the PB, whatever it's called, zone.
Right.
So
Especially
it's your fault. It's your fault, not ours.
I understand. Let's flag that as not being included in the PV2 zone.
Well,
Or at
I
least,
think we've agreed that what we're going to do is revisit the whole issue of drive-throughs in all the zones, whether it's allowed now or not, in all the commercial zones, and make a rational decision about where, if at all, we want to allow them.
I completely agree.
That's what we're gonna.
I'm good with that, but let's make sure
That's
it
what we
doesn't
need to
get,
do.
let's
That's
just
what we
make sure
need to
that's
do.
not kind of an oversight of.
Let's
any
not do it by
approval.
accident.
Yeah,
Right,
let's
Right,
not figure out that
exactly.
we did it after we did it.
right.
Let me just explain
I don't know, is
just for a
Mark-
moment here. All
Is
of the
Mark Shansky
commissioners,
still here?
Glenn, you lost control of the meeting.
I apparently, I'm not sure I ever had control, John. So all of the commissioners should have PDFs showing a 3-map set for zoning. So what I've shown you is the proposed map. This is the changes map, and in that set should also be the existing map. Now, it doesn't show all of town because our primary focus, and really the only area where zoning changes were happening, we're near the Route 1 corridor from Madison to Branford. So this is the map which is changes. And so as Phil has pointed out here, what has happened at the interchange at 57, this salmon color, I guess maybe I'll call it, was C4W to PRB2, Post Road Business 2. Whereas the light blue over here is Post Road Village 2 to Post Road Business 2. So different original zones now propose to go to the same zone. So this is the changes map where you can figure out what has happened or what is proposed to happen. And then the proposed map that we were looking at earlier is the one that does show what the zones would be. And that's what caught Phil's attention.
Yeah, if we could just flag that for further review, I think we can.
So does PRB2 allow drive-throughs by special permit then? Or is that something that's being created?
Well, it doesn't
think
allow
that's-
anything yet because it doesn't exist.
Okay, that's
No,
what I thought.
but the proposed, the PV2, which is going to be the,
PRB.
You changed to
PRB1.
PRB2.
I think,
so we're not
probably
gonna,
does allow it.
we're obviously not taking that away from the PV2. Question is, are we going to add it to the, listen to me, C-W4? So,
Okay, so what I have made a note to do for the commission is to do an analysis or a summary of drive-throughs. What zones are permitted in today, what zones they would be permitted in the future, and how those zones relate to each other. So now
So-
you'll have, I think, a clear understanding of what's permitted today, what would be permitted in the future, and then you can look at that and say, that's not the result that we anticipated or expected. We can address that then.
So to the best of my knowledge, the drive-throughs are only allowed in the PV2 and the SCW, which is basically the rock file. All other drive-throughs are existing non-conforming
That's right.
for restaurants.
Yes, that's
So-
correct.
Glenn, can you, so it looks like we're creating a bunch of new names for zones, not necessarily new zones. And
Right.
is there a set standard of how you're converting whatever the zoning regs were for a zone into the new ones? Are you
Yeah,
like what was your process for that? Or like, what's the expectation? In this example, PV2 going to PRB2, does that mean that PRB2 is effectively taking the same zoning regs as PV2, or is it coming from somewhere else, or how is that working?
George and Aaron and I went through an analysis of the different zoning districts. Based on the similarities between those districts, we proposed the reconfiguration of these. I had the sense when we did this that George and Aaron had talked to the commission as part of this and kind of given an overview of what we're intending on doing, and then went ahead and deployed it. So I think it's probably important, Scott, for you and the other commission members to get a refresh on this. And so again, I'm just thinking a graphic or something that says, okay, this is the original zone. And this is the proposed zone, so you can clearly see what
George-
changes were.
George, can I kick this one back to you so we can move on with Glenn? Is it possible to put together just kind of a summary? I mean, I would consider that to be a significant change. To
Yeah.
put together a list of the, you know, what Phil might consider to be significant changes, which is generally not that significant, but changes just so we can review those. So, you
Yeah,
know, we don't have to be trying to catch these things. But if you could put together a list of the changes that are potentially substantial in nature, just so we can know these as we're talking about it and going through it, and then we
Yes, I
can
can
move
do
on to
that.
our next
yeah,
overlay.
absolutely.
That'd
Absolutely.
be great. Thank
Yeah.
you. The commission okay with that?
I am.
Yeah. What is and what is proposed.
Yeah, just kind of like, what are we looking to change? That's,
I think it's mostly the stuff that Glenn has in his margins, if we could see
yeah,
that.
except this, I mean, I guess maybe this one would have been flagged, but it just caught my eye. Sorry.
No, I'm glad it did, because I think, again, we want to be cognizant here of the changes that are being made, so we're not surprised later. So,
Well, and the last thing you want, that any of us want, is after the fact, when people go, "Oh, who let the barn, you know, who left the barn door open? And
Yep.
to do what?"
How'd the cow get out?
Yeah,
understood.
so,
So the next special zoning district is the Town Center South Overlay District. This one dates from about 2007. Overall, I think that that regulation, which I was actually involved in the crafting of it, was fairly complicated in the way it came together. So what we attempted to do here was to clarify the language in terms of what is required. So there's uses which are allowed by special permit. There's standards for special permit development in the regulations. There's some procedures that are followed, and Town Center South is the area which is near the train, around surrounding the train station overall.
And so I think everybody knows that the future of Town Center South is going to be affected dramatically by the very likely movement of the public works out of that area. So is there anything in this part of the code that would affect that, or?
Yeah,
Overlay.
absolutely. Absolutely. That recommendation to move the public works garage is actually part of the Town Center South plan.
Yeah,
And
Okay.
The hope embodied in that plan was that that property would be redeveloped as a transit-oriented use. Either in all likelihood offices where people might commute to Guilford to work, or alternatively residential development where people would utilize the transit service as their mode of transportation to work in New Haven or Stamford or wherever they went.
Mhm.
So
do
the
we
zoning
have
will
do we have a map we can pull up of the Town Center South?
I think Glenn just had it a moment ago.
All right.
Yep.
It is an overlay zone under the current regulations. And again, that was the zoning district that was created pursuant to a a carefully crafted public participatory planning process. Yeah, I think it's
So it's this red area
Dotted
here.
line.
red dashed line, right? Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, for some reason, I can't
Oh, all
really.
right.
It's not letting me grab it and move it like I'd like to.
It's on the side. Or if you zoom in or out, you can probably,
Right there.
it doesn't let you grab. So it basically goes from, what is that, Pages Lane across?
Yes.
So let me-
Maybe, no, it's not Pages, it's that
No,
Stonehouse.
Stone House.
Stone House.
Stone House on the north, it jogs up a little bit.
Yeah, it picks up Is this the old school building, George?
No, that's 66 High Street.
Thank you. And
That's
then,
that's
I
the
don't think so.
crown-
I think
that's the-
60,
You want to come
That's the
over?
crown jewel of this district in terms of redevelopment. That was a former industrial property that was redeveloped. The old buildings were converted to residential, and then the new buildings were developed pursuant to this zone.
But isn't that more than 6 units per acre?
that's not 66 high.
No.
I'm
no,
sorry.
no.
Where are we here?
so here's the green.
Yeah, yes, it is. That's 66 High Street.
This purple is 66 high?
Yes.
Yeah. Mhm. The
Then
purple,
why is it on Whitfield then?
pardon me?
Whitfield's out here, I think.
Oh, all right, Whitfield's farther out to the right. Got it.
Yeah, the blue is our industrial zones. One of the principal features of this district was to allow the conversion of property in industrial zones to residential use by special permit. Industrial zones already permit office uses, but
So,
one of the principal or highlight features of the zone was to encourage that redevelopment. So you got 66 High Street as a result of that. And then, we're also talking about the development of the Arrow paving, another big, which is right in that vicinity.
which is
Which is
I-1,
another-
correct?
Pardon me?
Is that I-1?
I can't remember which I zone it was, but it was one
Well,
or
it was
two.
the same as 66 High Street is or
Okay. Yeah.
was.
It's
Yeah.
I1 right now, yes. Phil.
And now it's being proposed to be converted to
R2.
No,
I
So, no, so guys, this
Oh.
is the proposed zoning
this is
map.
the new
So
one, remember?
the I1 and the I2 have been combined, so both
Yeah.
of those are showing up as
Right.
purple.
Right.
And
Got
so
it.
the Arrow paving site is industrial zone with the town center south overlay. If you'd like, I could go back to the existing zoning map so we can actually trace the
I'm just
lineage
cur-
of this.
I'm just curious about what we're changing by converting something from I-1 to I-2.
Nothing. We talked about that a lot. There's no meaningful change, but I'll highlight that as part of this review that I do, Phil.
Okay, yeah, if you could note that and then
Yep.
note any potential building heights that can be allowed by special permit in the zone, just so we can chat about that too while we're
Yep.
on the topic.
Sorry, I'm bopping around here with screen sharing or whatever, but
You're doing good. You're doing a good
Yeah.
job.
Sorry, we're
It's all
an
right.
ADD bunch.
we want to make sure we get it right.
So-
This is
so
one
wait,
page.
I'm sorry. Can we go back to that overlay? If
Yep.
66 High Street was the crown jewel of this sort of overlay, I don't understand. 66 High Street has more than 6 units per acre. of
Right, so
land.
66 High Street, I think what George was trying to say, 66 High Street was originally a clock factory, and then it was Clinnipad, and then it was an abandoned, say abandoned, but a vacant property for a long time, and then was redeveloped into higher density residential use. So I think that's kind of where George was saying the crown jewel of the redevelopment.
But-
I should add for historical value, it was also the site of a critical component for the World War II effort.
New departure.
Interesting,
know.
but I'm trying to argue, I'm trying to ask, where did this density criteria come from?
The specific number
If
6.
6 units per acre of land we're saying not to exceed 6 units per acre of land. I'm questioning if we're calling 66 High Street the crown jewel. I think that's more than 6 units per acre of land. So why are we having this
Here's where you're getting stuck.
Yeah.
exception?
We include the marsh area
Yes.
as part of that.
If that's within the land ownership control of the specific development, that counts towards the density. I'm
Under-
sure,
And
I'm
and
sure
Glenn, I'll
that the
kick-
density is not any higher than 6 units per acre.
I'll kick
So
it back
we
to you,
are-
Glenn. Is that a typical shoreline community? I mean, do you include I'm gonna call it non-developable property as part of your coverage area?
We spend quite a bit of time talking about that as
Yeah.
part of our work on the regulations. I think the communities handle this issue differently. Some say, you know, to keep development in proportion to the buildable area of the site or what you perceive as buildable, it should be based on that. And other people say, well, hang on a sec, they're paying taxes on the full property. It is
Yeah.
already limited by the resources which are there. And so the commission will review that as part of a special permit or permitting process. So I don't recall that we made any change from what you've been doing with
Right.
regard to this particular area.
We
Got it.
didn't, I mean, Phil, when we talk about, you know, major changes in zoning, if we take property where you're now allowed to use tidal wetlands or other non-developable land in your density calculation, and we say in the future, you're not allowed to use that.
That's a
can have
major change,
That's a
That can
huge
be a
change.
huge change on
right?
the
But
property.
again, I'm just trying to get a
Yeah.
sense for what are we doing in relation to what other coastal communities are doing, and
Right,
you know, on a going for, I mean, if I have no, for example, if the Guilford mooring,
that's a good
Um,
example.
it is, because that's a fairly sizable piece of property with
Right,
a very small footprint for usable space that
Yep.
you could potentially put a much, much larger development on that would
right.
well exceed, you know, the coverage limits if it was just limited to the buildable area.
Yeah, no question. That's a
Just
that's
that,
a real,
you know, extreme
that's a real
example,
good,
but
that's a real good example. In fact, that's a example that's actually, there's some practical, or at least there was a few years ago, some real interest in that question on the part of the property owner.
Mhm.
How much density could they get? Could they build a, you know, 3 or 4 story building?
a 5-story building.
Right, with 10 or 12 units in it? Because they control the septic over across the street, where the
Brilliant.
parking lot is now. They could perhaps have septic over there.
That was a
So,
brilliant
yeah,
play.
they could have quite a substantial development there, absolutely.
For the
Subject to a
same,
lot of
on
other
the,
limitations.
on the same note, the Rothberg's Harriet Beecher Stowe house, if anything were to ever happen to it, is
Right.
on 8 acres of land, and a quarter, maybe a half acre of which is buildable.
I think, yeah, I think maybe we should give this some careful consideration, because I know that this is also an area that the town is interested in doing transit-oriented development.
Mhm.
And I
Right.
think that most people would look a little askance at 6 units per acre of land as transit-oriented development density. So I think. we've
So,
got
yeah,
to
George, if we could just
take
kind of
that
flat,
into
if it, again, I hate to push it back to you, but you have so many hats on now that might as well just flop them back and forth. If we could just kind of get a quick survey about kind of, let's call it Madison, Guilford, Branford, you know, even if you included Pine Orchard and Sachems Head, maybe not Sachems Head, Clinton, just get a sense
Indian
for
Neck.
Westbrook, just how, you know, how other towns have addressed the usable land question.
Okay.
I think that would be guiding for us.
Yeah.
Got it. Thanks. Sorry. Segue, derail.
I think
I'll interject just to tell you all that the World War II project that was top secret was the Norden bomb site.
Hmm.
Brought components from Guilford to Stratford, Connecticut every day by state police escort from Guilford.
Wow.
From the site where 66 High Street
Wow.
are right now.
Wow.
Wow. You're gonna have someone chasing you for now you got to go into hiding.
Yeah. But that's what happened every day in 1942, 43, 44. So,
Wow.
and there is a monument to the Norden bomb site on the south side of the green across Markham's building. If you
Huh.
want.
Thank you. That's great.
now I got to figure out how I can convince my wife to take a field trip to go see this. So thank you, Sean.
They did, for the record, they have started construction on the last building, which is,
Well, if there's any bomb sites laying around, I may
no,
want
yeah, there's
one
no,
for, you know,
hopefully they,
No.
Hopefully
Personally,
they're,
it's what
Hmm.
So the next special district is the floodplain overlay district. This is simply a zoning district. Refer everybody to chapter 174 of the Code of Ordinances, which is the floodplain management ordinance. So it doesn't have any material impact other than to make sure that people are aware that they're subject to the floodplain management ordinance in accordance with FEMA guidelines.
so it's literally the FEMA map?
The FEMA map is, yes, and as that FEMA map changes in the future, or should it change in the future, either for inland or coastal floodplain areas, then the zone map will change in the sense that these are the areas which the zone applies to. The next is a very similar type of situation. This is the Aquifer Protection Overlay District. Now, this is something I just want to make sure we're clear on with the commission. Guilford's regulations, when we got started, had two sort of groundwater related issues, one of which was the Aquifer Protection Overlay, but the other of which was the Groundwater Protection District. Guilford was a leader in terms of groundwater protection approaches. But since the adoption of that regulation with the advent of LID approaches and aquifer protection regulations, et cetera, it became redundant and actually kind of got in the way of some of the things that we wanted to try to accomplish. So included in this regulation is the elimination of the groundwater protection district and the inclusion in the reference now to the aquifer protection overlay district. Again, these regulations are, the state requires they be adopted independently. And so the zoning district is simply the location of these areas. George, the staff will keep track of exactly where those are. And this just tells people that they're subject to those regulations and gives them the link to go see what the regulations have to say.
So do the people have to be notified that they're in that kind of district, or do they just,
I see the state, I mean, the town has had these regulations since April 21st of 2006. And I think part of the reason why we adopted the floodplain overlay district and the aquifer protection overlay district, so that they will be clearly identified on the zoning map. And people will say, what's this? And then they'll go to the regulation and then they'll find the information that they need. So we're trying to be transparent here rather than having kind of a gotcha situation later. So
no, I get that. So will people be able to, I mean, this is a very,
Can
zoom.
we zoom in?
this is not, no, so this is going to be a pixelated map here, but is that helpful at all?
If you have the old zone map up in front of you somewhere else, it's already on here.
Okay, thank you.
This isn't anything new.
No,
No, it's
Doesn't
been around
look-
for 15 years.
It doesn't
but let me-
appear to be the same shape as the old one.
it is.
It is? Okay, then I'm wrong.
All right.
Scott, I always take your word for it.
It's not-
You're the
It's not
king.
the same as the groundwater protection, but we're getting rid of the groundwater protection. You can see there's the one. And then
Okay.
if you go up a little bit is the second one.
All right.
Okay,
There.
there we go.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Scott. So we're getting rid of groundwater protection up on Race Hill?
Just
Not
a
just,
huge
I mean,
area.
The groundwater protection district exists all over the place.
Right, it's huge.
And again, it's a groundwater protection regulation. Back before we had LID and the state
Right.
stormwater quality manual, et cetera. So now that
We've
we've
in effect expanded those provisions through LID to the entire area of the town,
Right.
not just limited to the groundwater protection district.
Okay. There's gonna be a quiz on all this later, by the way.
Too big. Okay. Now here we go. So the next one is the Coastal Area Management Overlay District. What we've done again is to identify this as a district because the coastal area boundary, the way it's described, et cetera, it's a line, but really what we're talking about is the land area within this is subject to the coastal area management procedures. We did a major reorganization of the material in here. People need to be very experienced in the CAM provisions to be able to understand what it is they can or cannot do. We attempted to make it as user-friendly as possible. So this again is a major reorganization revision of this material. We've made clear, we believe, where this applies to within the district, which types of applications will trigger a coastal site plan. And we've also put together a table which identifies, we hope in a user-friendly way, the type of activities and whether it is exempt or coastal site plan is required or it's just not allowed.
Can you just
And
bump that up, the zoom up just a little, because it's a little hard to read. Thanks.
yep, I can even go bigger than that. There you go. So I was trying to get the whole table on, but we've broken this down into activities within 25 feet, within 25 to 50 feet, or more than 50 feet away from the coastal resources. So certain activities such as conserving, preserving soil, et cetera, is exempt. And then you get down to changes, typo, changes in uses, buildings or structures, certain things are not allowed within 25 feet. A coastal site plan is required within 25 to 50 feet. And if it's outside of 50 feet, there's no coastal site plan is required. So it's our hope here that a property owner anticipating that they would like to add a deck or an accessory building would be able to come to this table, read through the categories, determine what it is that they want to do, and then understand what the permit implications are from them doing that. If
They
it's
would
either-
have, they would have
Go
to know how many feet they are away from any resource though, right?
They will. And I think that at some point in time, either a surveyor is going to have to get involved or from the GIS maps, they can probably figure some of this stuff out. But I also think it's going to help people visualize and understand before they get too deeply into planning an activity in a sensitive area, what the implications are going to be. So they'll go in with their eyes wide open.
Is it the actual activity or is it the lot?
It's the activity itself.
Okay.
And
So,
Glenn?
Yep.
Yeah, I know you got it under D1, but it doesn't deep have a lot of say on it, most of this?
I think any coastal activity needs a referral to deep. So that's something that staff will do, but how the commission will process this in terms of what gets a coastal site plan. So I think, again, George and Aaron are much more familiar with these procedures. And I think what we tried to do here was to make it clear and transparent for property owners so that they understand what they're getting themselves into before they get too deep into a project.
Are these consistent with some of the coastal towns you've worked with?
This is, I would say, evolutionary and different than other people have portrayed this information. Because again, it's the words that are in many coastal regulations don't help with an understanding, a clear understanding of what you can and cannot do. So George and Aaron and I spent quite a bit of time on this, trying to make sure that we were capturing it correctly and expressing it succinctly.
Yeah, I actually think this is quite nice. I just have I guess one point is that not all areas look at this distance from the coastal resource. In New Haven, for example, we do, if you're in the CAM, you're in the CAM, no matter if it's a foot of your property or all of your property. Secondly, I think some of the some of the issues that we run into with applications is the identification of the coastal resource. So is there language in the text here that talks about the type, what we're, you know, how does the applicant know what a coastal resource is, I guess is the question that I'm asking.
So the table's big enough, Jamie, that it ended up on the bottom of the prior page. So this paragraph here, I think, captures what you were just describing. Unless it's specifically exempted below or by statute, all buildings, uses, and structures fully or partially within the coastal boundary are subject to the coastal site plan requirements and procedures in this section of the Connecticut General Statutes. The columns which reflect horizontal distances are from a critical coastal resource, and those list what those are. And I think it says up above that words and terms used in this section may be defined in 444 of the general statutes. So as
Right,
those
that's where
change,
the-
we're gonna track those as well.
That's where the definition of those things comes from.
Correct. So that's the major change here. I think we've carried forward the special limitations in the CAM overlay district. Excuse me. So tell PZC, we eliminated requirements for certain permitted uses to get a special permit if in the CAM overlay and within 250 feet of a critical coastal resource. The commission is going to be reviewing them anyway. And so that was 2 applications, and that was simplified. With the adoption of townwide LID requirements, there was an additional impervious coverage limitation. We're proposing to eliminate that. The view preservation standards, it's got a little complicated because of the development depth concept. I think we had these view guidelines here, which was, I guess George and Aaron tried to explain this to me in terms of whether the roadway or the view lane is a continuation of a public roadway versus perpendicular to a public roadway, and where the view corridors need to be, et cetera. So try to group and clarify those as well. So I think simplified the provisions related to public hearings. So let me just catch up. I don't remember exactly what that was.
I think we tried to reduce or eliminate the need for a public hearing in certain categories. And made it clarified where it was required. We had some optional standards for public hearing, so we tried to clarify that in this section where it was required with the use of the word shall. Distinguishing between may and shall. Make it a little simpler.
And then I think
Essentially, it dictates what you can do anyway. You can obviously hold a public hearing on any type of application you want to.
And then there's a section here with criteria and process for coastal site plan in terms of findings and criteria for the commission as part of their review. Ready to go to the next?
Yes.
This is a new concept for the commission's decision. This is a proposal for the regulations to incorporate something called a planned development district. This is a zoning tool which is gaining interest in a number of different communities, different types of communities around the state. Essentially, what a planned development district is, it's a hybrid approach to land use approvals, where a specific plan, such as a site plan, is approved through a zone change process. So what is advantageous in situations for this type of approach is that you get the specificity of a specific plan. And you also get as much discretion in a land use process as you can through a legislative action such as a zone change or a text change. So in my days as a town planner, with the commission that I worked with was always concerned about what they call the bait and switch. Somebody comes in for a zone change and shows you a wonderful site plan and you say, that's just beautiful. And you go ahead and approve the zone change. And then they come in with a plan later, which looked nothing like that.
Put it in an auto repair facility by right.
That could be a good example.
Well, we had one not too long ago where there was an abutting residential property that wanted to be converted to commercial with a commercial building and multiple residential apartments in the back. And at least other than the neighbors getting quite adamant about, not wanting, about saying, I purchased my property abutting a residential parcel. There was concern that, okay, if we approve this conversion, there's a whole list of things that could be, done by right. And that was at least part of the consideration of that.
So this has been proposed to allow the commission, if you're interested, to include this in the update as a possible new tool. It is a situation that could be used for a wide variety of things. So the commission needs to stay focused, if you will, on what they want to try to accomplish here. So initially here, the eligibility requirements say, and this is meant to be again protective, PDD shall only be cited in accordance with the plan of conservation and development as may be amended. Now, as you probably imagine, there's nothing in your POCD today that says where a PDD would go. But let's take ourselves back perhaps 10 years or so. We might have said, 66 High Street, because of its capabilities, its location, its amenities, would be a wonderful place for something like a PDD to accomplish our goal. And you could get to that by changing the zone to PDD. The second thing it says, a PDD shall not be used primarily to increase density in a residential area without corresponding community benefits. So it doesn't say you can't get more density. It simply says, what are the community benefits? And to involve a discussion and a trade-off. And let me just talk a little bit about the mechanics of this. The application that would come to the commission would involve three things. One of which is a master plan showing specifically what it is that they propose to do. Number two is a text amendment where the proposed text is actually the master plan. And then the third is a zoning map amendment, which would say PDD number 1 or PDD number 2, or whatever the numeric designation of this would be. So the commission reviews and approves the master plan. The drawings and text, which are the master plan, are codified as the text amendment, and then the map is changed to site PDD number 1.
But only in accordance, with the plan of conservation and development, right?
They'll only be cited. So the issue is, if I was representing an applicant.
Okay, just cited in terms of their location.
So this gets us away from approvals that are contingent upon this application being brought forward, which we're not allowed to do.
That's right.
If I was representing somebody who wanted to propose a PDD right now, the way this is crafted, and again, we can modify this language if the commission pleases, I would need to file an application to amend the plan of conservation and development to recognize that, 66 High Street or Arrow Paving or some of the other sites of the Public Works is a wonderful location for redevelopment and a transit-oriented location, whatever it might be. And the commission would say, that makes sense. Let's put that text or paragraph or notation into the plan of conservation and development. Now that gives you the green light to go ahead. And by having that plan of conservation and development language in there, it prevents somebody from just applying for a PDD anywhere.
So
anywhere.
Since you're throwing it out, and we're using 66 High Street as our example, how would one demonstrate the corresponding community benefit?
That's only,
Yeah.
Well, it's not, I would say, Phil, if I was testifying before you, that that's not actually a residential area. It's an industrial zone. So
Okay.
this paragraph may not apply.
Huh, okay.
So think about these provisions here, because the reason these are here and in red is to highlight these for your consideration. If you say, well, this is such a wonderful tool, let's allow it anywhere, you may not have any eligibility standards. If you want to proceed cautiously until you've had some experience with it, you might want to maintain these and perhaps some other ones.
So would a public hearing be the way to determine the corresponding community benefits? I'm not sure how we define that, or whether we should. I'm just throwing it out there.
I mean, I think that there's multiple public hearings that would be required as part of this. First of all, it says in here, I believe, that an public hearing is required. Yeah, well, okay, following the close of the public hearing. So there's going to be perhaps potentially a public hearing on the amendment to the POCD. There's going to be a public hearing on the text amendment, which is the master plan. And there's going to be a public hearing on the zoning map application. So you're going to have 3 separate public hearings,
Okay.
really technically combined into one for the same application.
Mhm. All right.
So again, this is a new concept. I want you to think about it clearly. I'm a big fan of this because I think it gives the commission the ability to think flexibly with regard to unique parcels and not necessarily set up, again, multiple little zoning districts for things.
Yeah.
Sites can be,
I like that. Have you seen this work in other towns, Glenn?
yes.
So
I mean,
I'm
West Hartford's been doing this for 30 years, maybe more at this point in time. There's communities around the state. I think New Haven did this. They went to court. They had the whole issue. They had the statutes changed so the community incorporated in 1764 or something, whatever. But I've dealt with this in one community, for example, where they had an old mill building on a river that every time they wrote the zoning district, it was 5 years after the market had passed. And so they were never catching up.
Yeah.
And this provided the opportunity for a developer to propose what they wanted. And
Yeah.
probably would have worked extremely well if the mill hadn't burned down. But there are plenty of examples around the state for this.
That wasn't the old axe factory, was it?
No, it wasn't an axe factory.
Is it a
Okay.
textile mill?
Glenn, I have 2 questions about.
Yes,
the
yes, Richard.
eligibility.
Go ahead, Jamie.
First is the example that Phil was using earlier. It was actually located close to the green. And that's sort of an area that's called out in the plan of conservation development as an area in which we'd like to increase density and diversity of housing. So is that close enough, or would you still have to amend the plan of conservation and development?
Jamie, I was trying to be careful here because again,
Okay.
this is a tool which.
No, I like the tool. I think that's why my head went right towards like, okay. And then the second question, which you're probably going to answer in the same way, is could affordability be considered a community benefit?
I was thinking about that because, 66 High Street did increase density and did increase diversity in the downtown.
I think that's that's probably a judgment call on the part of the commission. So again, if I was now advising the commission in that scenario, and so we were going to modify the plan of conservation and development to green light that location, I would have the conversation about what is a community benefit, what might that be, and set this, maybe the language in the POCD, which again is advisory, right? Could point to the issue about having some affordability requirement as part of this because of the need, because of the location, because of those other types of circumstances. So I don't know that you need all of the belts and suspenders, but I would encourage the commission to think about this and have some experience with it where you're very pleased about how things worked out And now maybe you're prepared to try some additional types of flexibility.
I would say, Jamie, that anything that is considered, I mean, it's all subjective, but anything coastal is going to be almost by definition far more expensive, so probably not affordable.
Yeah, but this isn't necessarily coastal. This is allowing for,
Yeah, this
No,
is.
no, I'm saying, Phil brought up 62nd High Street, it is.
sure.
It is.
Well,
coastal.
but Jamie's speaking of the example of the person that came looking for a zoning change to allow them to do a higher density, like 1 block away from downtown. And this would be an example of something that you could allow to happen without having a full-on zone change. This is why we denied it in that instance.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's a perfect example.
So this is an example of, we could approve an actual like specific master plan for a specific housing development for that lot without having to change the zone, which is the primary reason why it was denied. Now, again, that's not to say that if they came back, if we had this provision, they came back, we're 100% going to like approve it. Obviously, we'd have to go through deliberation again, but that's an example of what this would allow to happen.
Right.
And this is, I've been on the commission for some amount of years, and this has come up a handful of times in various places of people that wanted to do some sort of residential, higher density, and they've been asking for zoning changes as a result, and we've been very scared to do that. So I 100% am interested in this.
So let me just if I could, Scott, this still is a zone change, right? And it is a zoning change, but
I understand, but
only
it's
for
very
one site.
specific, right? It's not allowing, the problem that we were running into is that we're changing it to a commercial zone and allowing tons of different possible uses for that. Whereas you're doing a zone change for like a very specific use.
And a specific application.
Right.
Correct. And I think the other reason that there's the connection to the POCD here in this regulation is that people might jump to the conclusion, well, this is spot zoning. And spot zoning is pulling out of a specific property for a use which is not otherwise contemplated. In other words, you conferred special benefits. And by having the discussion in the plan of conservation and development about why that site would be appropriate, it's balancing its impact on its neighbors and perhaps even suggesting community benefits, I think gives you some diplomatic cover to the concept of treating a unique site uniquely. So I think that rather than just leave it sort of open-ended, I think having the POCD connection is worthwhile.
So are you saying that this is not an overlay? So whatever the zone was, if it was R1, for instance, it would be completely changed to PPD number 1.
Correct. If I can jump ahead here just for a second, Scott, because that's a good question. Again, we get into the effect of the approval, et cetera. So a plan development district approved by the commission is documented within this section of the regulations by language similar to the following. So if we were here today with PDD number 1, insert the name 66 High Street, approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission at a meeting on such and such a date and filed on the land records is hereby approved. That is. So when somebody goes to the regulations to say, what's this PDD number 1 thing, they get to this note, and it turns them to the maps and documents on file on the land records and in the land use office. It lays out the specific site plans approved by the commission, and that is what was approved. You can do slight modifications in the future if it doesn't decreases a dimensional element or doesn't substantially alter the character of the approved master plan, et cetera.
So how do, in practice, do other folks that are using this, how do they control having somebody not, what's stopping somebody from proposing all kinds of possible uses, not uses, but like completely disregarding whatever the zoning regs are for that piece of property, like in terms of setbacks or whatever. They're just proposing whatever they want to do, and we as a commission have to sift through that and decide whether we have a problem with it or not.
I think that they could apply for whatever they want to do. but I think it is the job of the commission. It said right at the beginning that an informal discussion is strongly encouraged here. And so if somebody was coming, I think as Jamie had indicated earlier, a site close to the town green or the town center, you would say, listen, the streetscape, the setbacks, the building heights, the building form, the massing are critical elements on that site. So yes, we understand you want to be a little flexible on your uses. And maybe you're going to go a little bit higher in the height on this portion of the site, which isn't particularly visible. Or you're going to create something over here, which might not otherwise be permitted. We understand that, but you need to understand when your application comes in, if you do not pay attention to those important elements, your chances of getting approval are inversely related to the amount of time you spend. It's just a
Yeah.
waste of everybody's time. Don't do that.
I like it, but that could be a lot of work.
So quick,
Yeah.
quick,
Oh,
quick
yeah.
quick clarification. Does not substantially alter in the opinion of the zoning. The
Yeah,
zoning.
that's the zoning, it's a typo, ZEO. So this was a situation here, Phil, with it.
The zoning
um,
officer, the zoning board, the zoning commission.
This is intended to be the zoning officer.
Where
Well,
are you?
that's a little problematic, isn't it?
1B.
I mean, are we really tossing the character and substance of a change?
Oh, I'm sorry, no.
No.
It's
Where are you?
1B.
Yeah, let me take a look at that, Phil. Let me go back and look at the other regulations. There's clearly words missing here. It's either ZEO or it's Planning and Zoning Commission. So let me go
I mean,
back.
if you look at 2C, it says zoning commission. Substantially alters in the opinion of the commission.
So I think if,
You see the difference between 1B and then
Yeah.
2C.
right, so the question though is, which one gets to the level of, 2 gets to the level of, this is a change of the text amendment here.
Right.
It now has to go to the commission because it added or deleted or permitted use. You said you were gonna build the community center and you didn't build it. Whoa, 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 whoa. That's part of the plan.
Right.
And so any of these substantive things need to go to the commission. If the issue is they're moving a tree or a parking space or a drainage or an invert elevation or something else, then the issue is, okay, that does not substantially alter the character of the approved master plan. The tree was simply relocated. You don't have to come back, go through the whole zone change process for that. It's
Got it.
considered to be a minor item. So that's why I believe it was intended to be the ZEO. If the ZEO feels that, you know what, that does, in my opinion, substantially alter the character of the approved master plan, they're coming back to the commission to modify the site plan at that point.
One hopes.
No, well, I mean, okay, I mean, that's the way it's set up though. So again, this is a
It
new
does
provision
depend on having a CEO.
or an acting one.
Or an interim one.
An interim, oh, I thought, damn, I had a 50% shot of getting the word right and I missed it.
I don't think we got it right anyway.
Okay. So think about this one, please, as we move forward.
That's a big one. I like
It is a big one. I think it's a useful one. But I think that, again, the number of zoning districts that you ended up with over the years, I felt that really might be dealt more cleanly with this type of approach. And it might set the stage for some creative things in the future. So
And it
think it
takes,
through.
it takes the X factor off the table about us approving something and then being a bait and switch.
yeah, exactly. I think it ties down specifically. It doesn't allow for abuses, which we've all seen in the past. Section 5.9 of the regulations, we're proposing to delete the water supply overlay district. Again, because of the use of LID now, and as George indicated, townwide, all areas of Guilford drain into either Long Island Sound or public water supply watersheds, surface reservoirs, or intakes, et cetera. Talked about strict limitations on the use of land. We're going to do that as part of the zoning districts and the LID requirements. So we didn't feel we needed this provision anymore. There was another provision called the Vulnerable Local Watershed Overlay District. And this is a watershed which was projected at build out to exceed 10% impervious surface. And studies have shown that when you get above 10%, you start to see demonstrable impacts on water quality. And again, here with the use of LID, we're going to be paying attention to water quality and significant improvements on each development, to make sure that these issues are dealt with on site. We didn't feel that this one was needed either. So that's, again, I don't want the commission to be uncomfortable about these, but we think with the introduction and use of LID, we've got these issues covered.
LID being again, I'm sorry.
A low impact development, it's a drainage approach, which
Yep.
that's section 5. What time? We're at 9:03 here. What's the commission's appetite for section 6? Want to keep going as far as we can?
Let's
Until
go
you
to
cry
9.
out?
Let's go to 9:30.
Okay. So this is the section of the regulations that relates to use-related provisions. So elsewhere in the regulations where we have suggested a particular use or requirement, it might have a reference, say, as you can see in section, 6.4 or whatever the provision would be. So this, in the future, if the commission were to adopt standards for, hovercraft landing facilities, you might put those use-related provisions in this section and refer to it elsewhere. Section 6.1 are the provisions related to farms and farming. Some of these provisions were located in different sections of the regulation, so we've tried to pull them all together in one place. That includes the Agricultural Commission, provisions related to farm stands and farmers markets, the commercial farm, the keeping of animals. If you are a commercial farm, we tried to get away from the wording of commercial and non-commercial farm. We really kind of had a hard time doing it. So a commercial farm is somebody who is, it's defined in the regulations, is a serious farmer. Okay, it's not somebody who's gardening on their property or a weekend farmer. Maybe somebody has a horse or two. This is somebody who basically is sort of making their living through farming. They are expected to adhere to the DEP's Manual of Best Management Practices for Agriculture and standards by the Commissioner of Agriculture in terms of, again, best management practices. So those are the provisions that relate to them. There is no limit on the keeping of animals because they are required to know what they're doing. And we have DEP, the Commissioner of Agriculture, who will help us out on that. We also have this provision. This is for discussion purposes only at this time, but we're throwing this out for your discussion. For a commercial farm, farming can have its own unique set of challenges. This allows for the possibility of certain non-agricultural ancillary uses. This can include things such as hay rides, corn mazes, pick your own operations, snowshoeing, bird watching, and other types of recreational activities on an occasional basis, perhaps even for money or revenue. And then there's also the possibility, if the commission is comfortable doing these kinds of things, to get the major non-agricultural uses such as retreats, weddings, workshops, education, training, and classes, or any sort of, farm. In Simsbury, where I live, there's a farm which has farm-to-table dinners on a regular basis, big outdoor tents, and over the course of the summer. So is it a farm activity? No, it's not. Is it supportive of the farm? Yes, it is. So some places call these ag activities. So this is a concept, again, I wanted to bring forward for your review and discussion. George and Aaron and I talked about this, and again, that's why it's got this big note up here. This is for discussion purposes only at this time. Try to get feedback on whether this is helpful to farmers. Is this a concern to residents? How might we approach this particular issue? There are communities around the state that do this, and this is something that Guilford might want to consider.
George,
I'm just curious, for those of you who've done this commission longer, have some of these types of activities come before us that required a permit in the past?
well, so I was going to ask, what kind of permit does Dudley Farm have? Because I know that they do weddings there. I've been to one.
That's a special permit for facility of charitable, agricultural, blah, blah, blah. Dudley
And
Farm
they're
is
just allowed to do
like the
whatever.
fairground, and the same manner
It's
as
like
the
a fairgrounds.
Society, yes. The one example that kind of falls into this category a little bit is and I've forgotten the name of the farm. It's up there at the south end of Lake Quantipogue.
Makes
It's,
sense.
Trout Brook or something like
West
that?
Lake Feed,
it's Lake,
Yeah,
Lakeside.
that's it.
Lakeside.
So we've allowed some of this kind of stuff there. It is a commercial, venture. It's not a nonprofit. That's an example on a pretty small scale, a little bit, at least
Yeah, they do.
of this
I've
type
seen
of
it do
thing.
car shows and stuff.
Now we let Bishops have the music a couple
Bishop's
weekends.
is a little different. because
So-
it's in a-
so just
that's a
hold
commercial zone.
George cited Lakeside. So George, if we
Yeah.
were to adopt something like this, would Lakeside not need any permit?
Well, they're already in existence, so they wouldn't
Okay,
have to get a new permit, but
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
if they wanted to do 20 like all year round like they currently are, then this wouldn't really apply. They would need a special permit for that. This is for
right.
like
Or if they
temporary.
want to expand it or
Right.
make it bigger
All
or
right.
whatever,
Yeah.
then
okay.
they'd be subject to this.
Glenn, these numbers, 1 to 30 days, 1 to 5 days, is that just typical for other places that have adopted this?
I know of other places that have used these numbers, but I think that you have to think about what you think works best for Guilford. And
Okay.
again, this is a new provision. So my advice, I think, would be to start small and work your way up as you recognize that, you've got the appropriate provisions in place to manage this effectively.
I don't see
I-
medieval, I don't see medieval festival listed.
But one of the more,
Laugh away, Glenn.
Bill, I'm channeling you in a full suit of armor at this point,
Well,
so.
The medieval
Yeah.
festival caused quite a bit of chaos amongst the local
Right.
community.
If you want that, you gotta go to the town of Lebanon and go to their green now.
Right.
Just put, Glenn, can you cite the wearing of armor?
But I just
Or
want
the
to.
drinking of mead.
Now we're talking. Now we're on the same page.
Make a distinction here, which I think I've missed some of the details in this. The activities that you're referencing right now, I think are taking place at a nonprofit, right?
not
Which is
Lakeside
the-
Farm, no, that's a commercial venue.
But
So far.
the fairgrounds is what?
Yeah, that's a nonprofit.
So,
and
but this
and
wouldn't
Dudley's a
apply
nonprofit.
to them.
No,
Right.
that
So,
would
so
be
we've
separate.
got, I guess that's the question for me is that how many commercial farms do we have that this would apply to? Because I think a lot of those other activities that we're kind of
Yeah,
thinking
right.
about in this are in
The only
nonprofit.
one that's doing anything like this that I can think of off the top of my head is the Lakeside Farm or
Yeah,
whatever.
but I think, George, how many, would you say how many commercial farm operations are
Oh.
now?
They could potentially take advantage of this. Yeah,
Yes.
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, one of the more popular kind of versions on this, and variations, I mean, is which I can't remember if we talked about or not, Glenn, is the wineries, where they frequently become really substantial venues for weddings and activities like that.
Right.
So I think this.
That would fall
actually-
into that category D.
Yeah, it's actually the next page here, George. So just real quick on
Okay.
this page before I flip over, that one of the ways to manage this is to actually make a provision for a zoning permit being required for each event, which can also be a way to prevent it from becoming established in a pre-existing non-conforming use, because if they're supposed to get a permit and didn't, they can't claim pre-existing non-conforming use. The next area that, again, tell the planning and zoning commissions for discussion purposes only, is the concept of a farm, winery, brewery, distillery. The regulations of the state are in a bit of a state of flux over this right now in terms of the changing nature of the permits that are required. I have not looked at it since this past legislative session, but there was a provision in the state law that allows a winery to become a producer of wine. That simply gets a permit from the State Department of Consumer Protection. The issues that I think George is referring to is not the production of wine. It's the tasting of the wine, the
Right,
party of
right.
the wine, the wedding of the wine, the people in our suits of armor who show up to drink the mead, things like that. And so I think that this is, again, a possible area that you might want to think about and investigate. It can really become a situation where a business can get started, and as my old commission chairman used to say, the camel gets its nose under the tent, and farm production or wine production turns into wine tasting, which turns into wedding and business
Well,
meetings. And
you know, for any of you who are familiar with it, I would cite Rose Winery, Rose.
In
You know,
Branford.
Or Chamard.
I mean, the Rose Farm, which has been in existence since the late 1700s, just opened a winery in
And a venue.
and a venue for eating.
It's a restaurant too, yeah.
So it can happen.
And probably the economics dictate that it should, I would
Of
guess.
course, they've got to diversify their revenue stream.
the one town I'm familiar with decided to try to put the genie back in the bottle through the adoption of an ordinance which required a special permit review, not a special permit. It was an ordinance which required a special event permit, which now brought in police, fire, emergency medical, all of the stuff that might traffic control that might be required depending on the nature and size of some of these events, et cetera. So it's a delicate area,
Yeah,
but it's
Yeah.
not
Speaking of
addressed
overwork.
well in your current regs. So it's here again, and the big note here is discussion purposes only at this time.
Okay.
Finally, there's also something related to other farm accessory uses, building and structures, farm vehicles. They're being used for the farm, okay. Accommodations for seasonal employees, sawmills, excavation and filling. These are some of the issues that could be addressed in this particular section. There's also a section related to farm signs, both an identification sign or directional signage, and then signage for seasonal products. These are the types of activities that can help make farms successful. Now,
Glenn, did any of the stakeholders that you encountered during your very initial phases of this process have any comments about signage for farms? Did anybody?
No, I would say, Phil, I didn't get a specific comment about that. I think the issue that George and Aaron and I talked about was the whole concept about farm viability and the challenges of farming in this day and age. And that slight modifications to the traditional farm platform can actually make all of the difference. You know, that maybe in the fall they transition into Christmas wreaths or Christmas trees in addition to the things they may grow in the summertime, or then, you know, hay rides or other types of activities. And
Right.
so just specifically allowing for some of these things can open people's eyes up to the new possibilities. And then, of course, when we start getting into, you know, breweries, wineries, and distilleries, that's a whole different situation
Right.
that people may be trying to navigate towards, and the commission maybe should jump out ahead of that one a little bit.
Thank you.
The next section of the regulations deals with the keeping of animals. Now, this is the keeping of dogs, cats, and other domesticated pets, normally kept as human companions. So this, again, doesn't deal with a farm that has a herd of 100 cattle or anything else that may be going on with regard to that. But this starts to deal with the types of situations that can happen with the keeping of animals.
Are we are we going down a slippery slope where we say, you know, other domesticated animals? I only say that from the standpoint, I drove by a woman the other day who was walking up Whitfield Street with an 8-foot boa, you know, just like wrapped around her. I mean, it's like, I had to stop the car and say, you don't see that every day. But I mean, how does one define, are we going to have to then put in what is a domesticated animal? I mean, Some of you may recall our golden pheasant application
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
yes. Oh, yes.
where a
few
gentleman
times.
had 32 or so golden pheasants. And I'm sure he considered them domesticated.
But I think the second part of that sentence, I think, is operative here, Phil, which is normally kept as human companions and or are housed in a residence with human occupants.
You
So the
wouldn't have
situation I
hated that.
dealt with in another community was a Vietnamese potbelly pig.
Yeah.
I wouldn't
But
want
do-
one in my house. I mean, there's apparently a story on the internet about, somebody who had a Shetland pony living in their house.
Well,
These are-
okay, but a domesticated animal could grow up to be so large, it was let loose because it outgrew its domesticated
Yep.
dwelling.
Like,
So the issue here,
I
though,
guess
is
that slippery slope of living in one's house being
Yeah.
is, I don't know, I guess I don't want to make a problem until there's a problem, but
so I think that's a good point, Phil, because I think the issue is that zoning is a set of rules that, in a sense, we kind of agree to abide by with each other. The expectations we have as property owners. As part of my work with communities on zoning regulations and public meetings, I ask people, how many people in this room think that zoning should have the right to tell you what you can do on your property? And most people don't put up their hand. Nobody wants anybody telling them what to do. And then I asked the second question, which is, and how many people here think the government should have a right to tell your neighbor what they can do on their property? And everybody's hand goes up. So I think the idea here is that if we let the issue of pets go unstated in the regulation, is there a greater risk of, we don't want to get sucked into potbelly pigs and, descented skunks and other activities that can go on. But these things are probably, there's that
I
coat
didn't
of armor.
say it. I didn't
That-
say anything. but
It's a
you-
coat of armor, Phil. I know what you're saying. But I think the issue here could be one of kind of laying some groundwork about these types of scenarios. So
Okay, so I'm just looking at 62C, 62C, in paragraph 5. The keeping of hens and rabbits shall be conducted in a manner consistent with and in compliance with the public health code. So there's something that someone has to go search for and find, right?
no, I think that most communities deal with this on a complaint basis. So you may have issues out there today where hens and rabbits are perhaps not being kept in a manner consistent with and compliance with the health code, but nobody's going out and inspecting chickens every day. If there's a
No,
call,
but hens and rabbits can multiply rather quickly. So it's
Not
just-
without a rooster.
Yeah,
true. That's true. True.
that's why the roosters are legal.
That's why you don't, well, no, that's not why the roosters are not legal. It's because roosters are loud and nasty. But other than that. There we go.
No, I mean, we do.
Having chickens myself, I can tell you that when they guarantee you that they're giving you a straight run, it's not a guarantee.
so again, this section on keeping of animals is meant to deal with non-commercial farms. And this can include a wide variety of different types of things. We started with dog, cats, domesticated pets, to get the chickens and rabbits, which are, again, sort of a step up from that. And then we move on, and the next thing we have is keeping of horses, ponies, burros, pigs, weaned calves, sheep, goats, alpacas, et cetera, et cetera. So the question in a sense is, do we want to limit these types of things? And if so, how?
I don't
So
think
these-
this is, we made this that much different, other than sort of editorially, than the current regulations. Did we? In terms of, in terms
George
of,
has been long enough on this, I don't remember.
yeah, I don't think we did. I mean,
Yeah,
in
it
terms of
seems
these, in
reasonably
terms of these
close.
quantities,
Without knowing off the top of my head, it seems the quantities seem close.
yeah, that's my recollection. I'd have to double check too, Glenn, but
So have we as a commission encountered, I mean, aside from the golden pheasants, have we? Yeah, I know. That's a contradiction in terms, golden.
Golden pheasants.
Have we had a problem with this?
Have we
Not
encountered
really.
many
Well, we had
instances-
the real famous problem quite a few years ago of a pig that was being kept in a residential lot, a small lot. I mean, it was like a story in the New York Times.
And it was abutting a daycare
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
of 30 years ago. My
Yeah,
my
we
daughter
haven't
was
really
in the
had-
daycare.
We haven't had too many problems.
My wife wants a goat. I'm not getting a goat.
Well,
It's a lawnmower, Sean.
we can
Scott.
write, we'll
Well,
change that.
you can hire goats to eat your baby.
You can be running a yoga facility in your backyard, Phil.
The baby goat yoga.
Go,
Oh, I'm
yoga.
sorry, could you just go back to that head count? So is that saying that if you have 20,000 square feet, you can have 50 heads of poultry, rabbit, or similar small animals?
Where are we? Oh,
I'm just looking at the one number of animals, provided there is at least 20,000 square feet of pasture on a parcel, you can have 50 animals?
1 unit per acre of suitable land. So,
So.
and you have to have at least 20,000 square feet to get started. Okay,
Pasture.
So-
not land.
so if all I had was 20,000 square feet and all of the land was suitable, I take 20,000 square feet out of an acre, which is like probably 0.46 or something like that. And then
You could have
times,
50 rabbits.
no,
No,
it'd be 0.46 times 50, so that'd be about 23.
25.
I could have 23.
They're tough to count.
They move so fast.
So do we define pasture?
Yes.
That's a good question. I don't know. I'm
I
gonna
mean,
make
is
a note.
pasture just an area that, I mean, is my backyard
yeah.
that's
I
lawn
think-
pasture?
It's anything other than woods or pavement.
Wow, I got a lot of pasture.
And now Phil's, the wheels are turning. Phil's considering rabbits.
Not going down the rabbit hole.
All right.
All right, let's keep rolling. We got T-5, I think.
All other things which are included in section 6.2 are pet boarding facilities and just messed up my pagination here. Pet boarding facilities, pet grooming and daycare facilities. So we took those provisions and grouped them all here together.
This is all existing regulation.
Yep.
So you did a consolidation.
Yeah.
I think, again, they were located in different places in the regulations.
Okay.
So to try to put like topics together, that's what we went ahead and did.
It's just out of curiosity, did we define wildlife sanctuary?
No, we haven't done that yet, Phil.
Okay, thank you, just checking.
Or wildlife rehabilitation. I'm working on that.
All right,
Not that they're loaded questions.
I know, not that I'm gonna put Glenn on the spot for that one. 'Cause
Yeah.
I'm just gonna make a note though, to make sure that we talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, just so we kind of, because there has been quite a bit of discussion as to what actually is a sanctuary. And I think if we can properly come up with a definition, it will save us a lot of odds.
What was the other phrase? One was wildlife sanctuary. What was the other phrase? Or term to,
Rehabilitation.
Wildlife rehabilitation
thank you.
Facility.
Yep.
facility or entity.
So is this a good time to stop? You want to do one more?
One more section, or is that the end of the section?
That's the end of the section 6.2. Section 6.3 is the next one, which has to do. So this is language, all red here, because Guilford does not really have language related to fences and walls. Does the commission want to incorporate language which contains provisions related to fences and walls? The height, generally what municipalities do is they treat freestanding fences and walls differently than retaining walls. They decide whether or not they're subject to the yard setback. So for example, if a fence is less than 4 feet or less than 6 feet, it's not subject to setbacks. It's exempted from setbacks. If it's more than a certain height, bless you, Jamie, at that point in time, it is then considered to be a structure and subject to the setbacks. So this would be the type of thing that would prevent somebody from putting an 8 or 10-foot wall right on the neighboring property line. It
Why,
would be,
how did we come up with 6 feet? I know that's the way it currently is.
I don't know, Phil, it's been long enough, I don't know for sure. I think all of this language here was language that we've talked about with George and Aaron, and I don't
6
believe this
feet,
is in
so
your
that's
current
what-
regs today.
It is today, and that's, if you buy stockade fence at Home Depot, that's what it is. It's 6 feet. That seems to be a pretty standard fence height.
Just
Okay.
note to self, George, could you just, again, check with our kind of neighboring communities
Sure.
to find out whether or not that's consistent with,
We have a provision that allows you to put an 8-foot fence on the property line, subject to the approval of the adjoining property owner.
Ah, that's right, yes. So the next section to get into, we may want to push this off to our next meeting, starts with motor vehicle facilities. And
I
then
think so.
following that,
yeah, I'm thinking we can push that one to our next meeting, if that's all right with you.
Glenn, if you could humor me for 1 second and bring up that map of the zoning map changes.
Yep.
I just have been, we discussed earlier about George, you're gonna work on kind of demonstrating what's changing. I just,
bless you.
I think we're on this. Can you go to the table of contents?
Okay, so I got a couple of maps up here, Scott. So I have the existing map, the proposed
The
map.
one that shows changes.
I
proposed
think that's what
changes.
this is here, yeah.
So if you go to so see the table of contents over there on the left. I think what's confusing is that there's a step missing here that says, for instance, this PV2 is going to PRB2. PRB2 is not an existing thing. So if somebody's going to look up and seeing what's changing, they have no idea what's like, whether this PRB2 is using all of PV2s or not.
Maybe
So-
just put in like a parentheses formerly.
so I think,
are-
well, what I think you need to do is say, okay, so all of these pieces are becoming PV2, and then we're doing a name change, right? So like make that distinction of like, of what's, when you're combining combining areas, combine them based off of what's currently existing in the zoning regs, and then designate, hey, okay, now that we have PV2 in one big group, now we're making the name change to PRB2.
Yeah, I'll try to do that in my summary, Scott.
That way it'll be clear to everyone, like, hey, there's no funny business happening. We're not just like creating a new thing out of nowhere. We're taking things from a known entity to another known entity, and then we're just changing the name to make it clear.
Right. Or if we are making substantive changes, then those will be highlighted.
Then those will be highlighted, correct?
Yep, gotcha.
Thanks.
Great. Marjorie, you've been sitting patiently. Any questions?
No, thank you, but I enjoyed the evening immensely.
Oh,
What is wrong with you?
Terrible.
Yeah, Marge, you need to get a life.
Well, truer words were never spoken.
Well, thank you for putting up with us and holding us to our word.
Thank you for letting me watch.
So-
George, I'll coordinate with you in terms of our next meeting date. I think I have us down for sometime in October, but I'll coordinate with you.
I guess
while we're-
that looks
while we're on that
looks like the
subject-
20th.
You want to try to hold the 20th? We have, I don't know what our regular business looks like yet on the 20th, but assuming it's not too much, we could at least shoot for that.
Yep,
That's-
I have a hold on my calendar for Guilford that night, so that works well
Okay.
for me.
All right.
Super.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Glenn. I appreciate all your help.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Okay,
guys.
Thanks,
Um,
everybody.
Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
Anyone?
show of hands.
By a show of hands.
Aye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Motion carries. Take care.